Hey, buddy, why are you sitting alone in an empty restaurant?
Just having my coffee. Why?
I passed by a few times. You've been here a while. Looks like you're casing the place.
No, I'm just enjoying my drink.
I know the owner, and he doesn't trust people like you around her. Let me see your ID.
I don't have to give you ID without cause.
Then stand up. I'm not playing
That's
around.
funny, because I'm the owner of this.
Officer Trevor Holloway had been with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department for exactly 9 months. 9 months since graduating from the academy, with average marks and an evaluation that noted enthusiasm, but questioned his judgment under pressure. He had no complaints on his record yet because he'd barely had time to generate any, but his training officer had flagged him twice for making assumptions based on appearance rather than behavior. Those flags were noted in his file and then ignored because St. Louis PD was desperate for officers and couldn't afford to wash out recruits who technically passed the minimum requirements. One Tuesday morning in St. Louis, his inexperience and unexamined biases collided with a man relaxing in his own establishment, and that collision would end Holloway's law enforcement career before it truly began, cost the city $650,000, and expose how departments put undertrained officers on the street without proper supervision. A black man in his mid-30s, Marcus Lawson, was sitting in a booth at his diner sipping coffee during the quiet hour before lunch rush, wearing a gray sweatshirt and jeans, his phone in his hand as he scrolled through his social media feed. No crime, no disturbance, no unusual behavior. Just a small business owner managing his restaurant during a slow morning period between breakfast and lunch, but Officer Holloway saw him through the narrow lens of a rookie who'd absorbed more stereotypes than actual training, who couldn't distinguish between suspicious activity and normal human existence, and who was about to learn that jumping to conclusions about people's legitimacy in spaces has consequences that end careers. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. St. Louis, Missouri, the Delmar Loop, a vibrant 6-block stretch known for its eclectic mix of restaurants, vintage shops, music venues, and small businesses where foot traffic flows constantly during peak hours but quiets down mid-morning when shop owners catch their breath between rushes. The area has character, history, diversity, the kind of neighborhood where local entrepreneurs build dreams one customer at a time. It was 10:15 on a Tuesday morning in April. The breakfast crowd had cleared out by 9:30. Lunch customers wouldn't start arriving for another hour. The sun streamed through the front windows of Lou's Diner, illuminating dust motes floating in the air and casting warm light across the vintage Formica tables and vinyl booth seats that gave the place its retro charm. Marcus Lawson had owned Lou's Diner for 8 years. 8 years since he'd left his job as an accountant, taken a risk on a failing restaurant, renamed it after his father, and rebuilt it from the ground up. 8 years of learning the restaurant business through trial and error, failed experiments and successful innovations, slow months that tested his resolve and busy seasons that validated his vision. The diner served soul food with a contemporary twist, breakfast classics with unexpected flavors, the kind of cooking that earned loyal customers and positive reviews. Marcus had a degree in accounting from Washington University. He'd worked for a firm downtown for 7 years, wearing suits and crunching numbers and feeling increasingly disconnected from work that felt meaningless. His father, Louis Lawson, had always dreamed of owning a restaurant, but never had the opportunity. When Marcus turned 29, he decided to honor that dream. He'd researched, he'd planned, he'd saved, he'd taken the leap. The first 3 years were brutal. Long hours, thin margins, staff turnover, equipment failures. Learning to cook professionally while managing business operations, while maintaining quality, while keeping customers happy. But he'd persisted. By year 5, Lou's Diner had become a neighborhood institution. By year 7, food bloggers were writing about it. Now, at 37 years old, with 8 years of ownership behind him, Marcus ran a successful business that employed 12 people and served hundreds of customers weekly. That Tuesday morning, he'd arrived at 6 to prep for breakfast service alongside his morning cook. They'd serve the regulars, the early risers, the people who wanted coffee and conversation before starting their days. By 9:45, the last breakfast customer had paid and left. His cook was prepping for lunch. His server wouldn't arrive until 10:45. Marcus had poured himself a cup of coffee, settled into his usual booth near the window where he could see the street, and pulled out his phone to catch up on emails and scroll through social media for a few minutes before the lunch rush began. He was wearing comfortable clothes because he'd be in the kitchen during lunch rush. His phone was in his hand because he was scrolling through messages. His posture was relaxed because he was in his own space, a place he'd built, owned, controlled. He had every legal, moral, and practical right to be exactly where he was. But Officer Trevor Holloway, 9 months out of the academy, didn't see any of that. Holloway had been assigned to the Delmar Loop beat 3 weeks earlier. His training officer had signed off on him after the minimum required field training period, noting that Holloway was eager but sometimes made rapid judgments without gathering sufficient information. But the department needed bodies on patrol, and Holloway met the basic competency standards, so he'd been cleared for solo duty. That morning, Holloway was driving his route when he passed Lou's Diner. He noticed a black man sitting alone in a booth in what appeared to be an empty restaurant. Holloway had lived in Street, Lewis his entire life, but had never been to the Delmar Loop much, never eaten at Lou's Diner, never interacted with the business community in this neighborhood. To him, this was just another patrol area. He drove past once. The man was still sitting there, alone, not moving much. Holloway's training kicked in, the part about being observant, about noticing anomalies, about investigating suspicious circumstances. But his training hadn't taught him to distinguish between actual suspicious behavior and normal human activity. So when he saw a black man sitting alone in what he thought was a closed restaurant, his mind jumped to conclusions. Is the restaurant even open? Why is he alone? Is he waiting for someone? Planning something? Maybe he broke in? Maybe he's casing the place for later. I should check this out. Holloway circled the block and drove past again. The man was still there, still alone, still just sitting. Holloway's rookie instincts told him this was worth investigating. His lack of experience prevented him from considering innocent explanations. His unexamined biases made him see a black man in a diner and think criminal rather than customer or owner. Holloway pulled into a parking space directly in front of the diner and got out. He could see the man clearly through the window now. Casual clothing, coffee cup, phone in hand, but Holloway saw those details and interpreted them through suspicion rather than logic. He walked to the door and entered. Do you think rookie officers should be required to patrol with senior officers for at least 1 full year? Drop your answer below. Marcus looked up from his phone when he heard the door open. He saw the uniform, the young face, the cautious body language of someone unsure but trying to project authority. Marcus had been a black man in America for 37 years. He knew how these encounters could go. He set down his phone and prepared himself. Hey buddy, why are you sitting alone in an empty restaurant? Marcus kept his voice neutral, friendly even. Just having my coffee. Why? Holloway stepped further inside, his eyes scanning the space. Empty tables, quiet kitchen sounds from the back. One person sitting in a booth. I passed by a few times, you've been here a while. Looks like you're casing the place. Marcus felt the familiar mixture of anger and exhaustion that comes from being presumed guilty just for existing. Nah, I'm just enjoying my drink. I know the owner, and he doesn't trust people like you hanging around. Let me see your ID. And there it was. People like you. The phrase that carried centuries of assumptions and prejudice. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. I don't have to give you ID without cause. Holloway's hand moved to his belt, hovering near his radio. I'm not playing around. Marcus leaned back in the booth, a slight smile crossing his face despite the situation's absurdity. That's funny, because I'm the owner of this place. Holloway blinked. What? I'm the owner. Lou's Diner. That's me. I'm Lou. Well, technically, I'm Marcus, but I named it after my father Louis. I've owned this restaurant for 8 years. Holloway's expression shifted between confusion and skepticism. You expect me to believe that? Officer, it's not about what you believe. It's about what's true. I own this diner. I'm sitting here having my coffee and checking my phone during the quiet hour between breakfast and lunch. I've been doing this for 8 years. If you own it, prove it. Marcus gestured toward the back wall. See that framed article from Street Louis magazine? That's about this restaurant. My picture is in it. See the business license next to the register? My name is on it. See the health department certificate? Also my name. Marcus Lawson, owner. Holloway glanced toward the documents but didn't move to examine them closely. Those could be fake. Fake? Officer, those are official city and state documents with seals and signatures. Why would anyone fake business licenses to sit in a diner drinking coffee? I don't know what you're up to, but I'm not up to anything. I'm a business owner managing my business. What I want to know is why you looked through that window, saw me, and decided I must be doing something criminal. Is it because the restaurant was quiet? Because I was alone? Or because you saw a black man and couldn't imagine he might own the place? This is where inexperience meets bias. Trevor Holloway wasn't a bad person. He wasn't overtly racist. He'd gone into policing with genuine intentions to help his community. But he'd been trained to see patterns, to notice anomalies, to investigate suspicious circumstances. The problem was that his definition of suspicious had been shaped by implicit biases he'd never examined. A black man alone in a diner registered as anomalous in his mind, something requiring investigation, because his brain had been trained by society to see black people as out of place in contexts of ownership and legitimacy. "I'm just doing my job," Holloway said, his voice defensive now. "Your job is to investigate actual crimes, not to harass business owners in their own establishments. How do I know you're really the owner? You could look at the licenses on that wall. You could check public business records on your phone. You could ask anyone in this neighborhood who's been coming here for years. Or you could use basic logic and ask yourself why someone who broke into a restaurant would be sitting calmly in a window booth checking his phone with the door unlocked." Holloway pulled out his radio. "I'm calling my supervisor." "Please do, because what you're doing right now is harassment based on racial profiling, and I want it documented." Within 6 minutes, Sergeant Patricia Owens arrived. She was a 19-year veteran who'd seen every kind of rookie mistake and had developed little patience for officers who created problems based on assumptions. She entered Lou's Diner and immediately assessed the situation with experienced eyes. A calm business owner sitting with his phone and coffee. A nervous rookie who'd clearly overstepped. No signs of criminal activity whatsoever. "Holloway, what's the situation?" "I saw this individual sitting alone in what appeared to be an empty restaurant. I investigated possible trespassing." Owens looked around the diner. Lights on, coffee pot brewing, kitchen sounds, door unlocked. "Holloway, does this look closed to you?" There were no other customers. "It's 10:20 on a Tuesday morning. This is between breakfast and lunch. Most diners are quiet right now." She turned to Marcus. "Sir, I'm Sergeant Owens. I apologize for the interruption. Can you tell me what happened?" Marcus set down his coffee cup. "Sergeant, my name is Marcus Lawson. I own Lou's Diner. I've owned it for 8 years. I was sitting here during our quiet morning period, checking my phone and having coffee, when this officer entered and accused me of casing the place. When I explained I owned the restaurant, he didn't believe me. He claimed to know the owner, which is false because I've never met him. He demanded my ID without cause. He refused to check the business licenses on that wall. And he called his supervisor because he couldn't accept that a black man in a sweatshirt might legitimately own a successful business." Owens walked to the wall and examined the licenses. Business license issued to Marcus Lawson, health department certificate for Lou's Diner, proprietor Marcus Lawson. Liquor license listing Marcus Lawson as owner. She pulled out her phone and quickly verified the business registration through public records. She turned back to Holloway, her expression a mixture of disappointment and anger. "He's the owner. The licenses are right there. Public records confirm it. You stopped a business owner in his own restaurant based on nothing." Holloway's face flushed. "I was being proactive. You were profiling. There's a difference." Owens turned to Marcus. "Mr. Lawson, I sincerely apologize. This was inappropriate. Officer Holloway is new, but that doesn't excuse this encounter. If you wish to file a complaint, I'll provide you with all necessary information." Marcus stood up from the booth. "Sergeant, I appreciate your professionalism, but I need to be clear about what happened here. Your officer saw me through that window and made an assumption based on my skin color. He claimed to know the owner when he doesn't. He accused me of criminal activity with zero evidence. He demanded identification without legal cause. And when I told him I owned this place, he called me a liar instead of taking 30 seconds to verify the truth. That's not rookie inexperience. That's racial bias. I understand. And do you? Because this isn't the first time I've been profiled. It's not the first time someone couldn't believe I own a business. But it is the first time a police officer has done it in my own restaurant. I'm 37 years old. I've worked my entire adult life to build this place. And your 9-month rookie looked at me and saw a criminal." A regular customer entered the diner, an elderly white woman who'd been eating breakfast at Lou's for 7 years. She saw the police presence and Marcus's expression and immediately understood something was wrong. "Marcus, everything okay?" "Hey, Mrs. Patterson, I'm fine. Just dealing with an officer who didn't believe I own my own restaurant." Mrs. Patterson looked at Holloway with undisguised contempt. "This is Marcus's place. Everyone in the loop knows that. What were you thinking? Should rookie officers face stricter penalties for profiling incidents since they set career patterns? Let me know what you think." By that afternoon, word had spread through the Del Mar Loop business community. Marcus told the story to his lunch staff. They told regular customers. Customers posted on social media. Within hours, local news outlets were calling for comment. Business owner confronted by rookie cop in his own diner. Street Lewis officer demands ID from restaurant owner. Refuses to check licenses. Police harassment caught on security camera at Del Mar Loop establishment. Marcus's security cameras had recorded everything. The video showed Holloway entering the conversation, Marcus pointing to the licenses on the wall, Holloway's refusal to verify the supervisor's arrival. Small business associations responded immediately. The Del Mar Loop Merchants Association issued a statement supporting Marcus. The Street Lewis Black Business Network called for immediate action. Local civil rights organizations offered assistance. Marcus hired an attorney within 2 days. The lawsuit named Officer Trevor Holloway, his training officer who'd signed off on him prematurely, and Street Lewis Metropolitan Police. The allegations were specific: racial profiling and discrimination, unlawful detention and harassment, violation of property rights, negligent training and supervision, emotional distress. The complaint noted that Holloway had been cleared for solo patrol after minimal field training despite documented concerns about his judgment. It argued that the department's staffing crisis had led to inadequately trained officers being put on the street. Street Lewis city attorneys reviewed the case. Security footage showed everything. Business licenses proved ownership. Multiple witnesses confirmed Marcus's standing in the community. Holloway had no legal basis for the stop. The profiling was obvious. The city settled 19 months later, $650,000 paid to Marcus Lawson. Not the largest settlement, but significant for what it represented. Accountability for a rookie whose biases were exposed before they could generate years of complaints. Officer Trevor Holloway was terminated 4 months after the incident. The termination letter was direct. Officer Holloway racially profiled a business owner in his own establishment. He made assumptions based on appearance rather than evidence. He refused to verify easily accessible information that would have prevented this incident. He demonstrated judgment failures that make him unsuitable for law enforcement. Employment terminated. Holloway's name entered the National Decertification Index. His law enforcement career ended at 9 months. He didn't appeal. His attorney advised him that fighting a termination for profiling a business owner in his own restaurant was unwinnable. Holloway released a brief statement. "I made serious mistakes based on poor judgment and implicit biases I didn't recognize. I accept full responsibility and I apologize to Mr. Lawson." Marcus's response was measured. Officer Holloway is young. He made a choice based on how he'd been trained to see the world. But the real failure is a system that puts undertrained officers on the street and expects them to make good decisions without proper supervision. 9 months of experience isn't enough, and nobody should have to prove they own their own business to a cop who made assumptions. Street Lewis PD implemented reforms 8 months later, extended field training from 12 weeks to 6 months, mandatory business community engagement for all officers, bias recognition training before solo patrol authorization, earlier intervention for officers flagged during training. Marcus testified at a city council hearing. "I built this business over 8 years. I employ people. I pay taxes. I serve this community. And a 9-month rookie walked into my diner and treated me like a criminal because he couldn't imagine a black man in casual clothes might be the owner." $650,000 is what that assumption costs taxpayers. But the real cost is the message it sends. That even after years of work, even with licenses on the wall and customers who know you, you still have to prove you belong in the space you created. Why do rookie officers' biases often go unchallenged during training? Comment your thoughts. This wasn't about one Tuesday morning. This was about a department that cleared an officer for solo duty despite documented judgment concerns. Trevor Holloway had no complaint history because he'd barely been on the job long enough. But his training officer had seen the warning signs and approved him anyway because staffing needs outweighed proper preparation. Marcus Lawson paid the price. Profiled in his own restaurant. Forced to defend his legitimacy as a business owner, treated like a criminal in a space he'd spent 8 years building. Trevor Holloway's career is over. That's consequence. The city paid $650,000. That's accountability. But money doesn't erase humiliation. Termination doesn't undo the harm of being criminalized in your own business. The real question is what changes now? Do departments extend training periods so rookies actually learn before patrolling alone? Do they take training officers' concerns seriously instead of prioritizing staffing? Do they teach officers to verify before confronting? To question their assumptions before acting on them? Because if we don't fix the system that put Trevor Holloway on the street after 9 months with minimal supervision, if we don't address the training that teaches officers to see black people as out of place in contexts of ownership and success, then we're just waiting for the next rookie, the next victim, the next business owner who has to prove they belong in their own establishment. Comment if this should be mandatory. No officer patrols solo until completing 1 full year of supervised field training. No exceptions. No shortcuts due to staffing needs. And if you believe these stories matter, if you think proper training prevents these incidents, then hit that subscribe button. We're exposing how departments prioritize filling shifts over preparing officers. We're demanding better. We're fighting for business owners who deserve respect in the spaces they built. This isn't about one rookie or one owner. It's about training standards and the system that produces officers who profile before they think.